Hi, guys. How are you? It's good to be back this week. I hope everybody has had a great week. And thank you for joining me for another episode of the Mother Delamort Show. So, we're going to wait for everybody to file in and get comfortable. We've got a really interesting episode and content tonight, and something that you really haven't heard probably a lot about. And I just find it absolutely fascinating. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and a little bit of humor in there too. So I think it's going to be fun. So if you're new here, let us know that you're here and say hello. We always like new victims in the crypt. And if you're here and you're one of our regular supporters, say hey and let us know you're here too. So I'm going to let everybody file in here a little bit more. We need just a couple of more, and then we'll get started. That way, everybody doesn't miss the first part of the feed. So let's see what's going on here in the chats real quick. So we got a bunch of people in here already. So hi, Calvin. How are you? Hi, Damon. Hi, Tyler. Hi, Dom. How are you? Hi, Lacey. I hope everybody is doing well. We are doing really good. Oh my goodness. So, kind of a side note, just to chit chat a little bit before we actually get started. I watched what was it? Greenland tonight. If you have not caught it, it's in Redbox. It was really, really good. If you like the like dystopian, like end of the world type movies, it was really, really good. I really, really liked it. So grab it on Redbox, or if I'm not sure if it's on Prime or on demand yet, but it was really good. I really, really liked it. So, okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And for anybody that is just coming in, what we're talking about tonight is both a merment, and yes, it sounds kind of funny, but you're going to know what it is as soon as we get to talking about it if you don't already know what a merment is. We're also going to be talking about it does seem to be very particular to Great Britain and England, but we're going to be talking about the screaming skulls, or as they're referred to as the heads of the household. So, so human bones have long held a place of fear and worship and power throughout history and culture, eventually manifesting within the horror genre of the 20th century. So we all know human bones, especially the skull, has always been something like it, like it's saying, to fear, to worship. Ancient cultures thought that, if they collected the skulls of their enemies, they would somehow, be granted their power and things like that. So the actual history of the skull goes way back, but the screaming skulls do seem to be very particular to the British Isles. So, and then what we're going to talk about too is, like I said, a merment. So a merment is a centuries-old practice of entombing people within structures. So yes, even Poe, in his 1846 story of the Cast of Aldamato, delivered to readers a chilling tale of truly sadistic murder. Poe's piece tells a story of a man recounting to a friend how he had his revenge on a former acquaintance by luring him into the catacombs with the promise of a highly prized cask of wine. Now, the story's narrator then describes how he chained his enemy to the wall and proceeded to seal him into his tomb with bricks and mortar, leaving him to die a miserable death within. Now, most attribute this practice as a means of punishment, which have no doubt it was. However, immunement entirely, it has an entirely even more darker history that goes into like ancestral worship and some of the practices that they would do. Now, during the Middle Ages, a time of extreme superstition, people used to immure children into the foundations of new buildings as a sacrifice so that the building wouldn't collapse. There are many cases of churches, castles, and even bridges, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, London Bridge is one of those, where the bones of little children have been found within the walls of these constructions. Also known as founder's sacrifice or builder's rites, it refers to the practice of burying a human being in the foundation of a new building as an attempt to ensure that it stands. Building a structure was an effort to the spirits and the deities of the land. So, to appease them, you had to offer a sacrifice. In turn, the sacrificed person was transformed by death. They became a protective spirit bound to guard the building that had become their tomb, an idea that some scholars have argued is the root of our modern haunted house theories and tales. Now, stories of foundation sacrifices abound from Great Britain to India to Japan. And in the Balkans, ballads about foundation sacrifices are so renowned that variants of the tale have been embraced as part of a national identity in Hungary, Romania, Serbia, and Greece, among other places. Now, in the days before burglar alarms and CCTV cameras brought us a degree of security, our ancestors had to rely on more natural methods to provide them with a degree of security and peace of mind. So this was kind of their way to do it. And we still see the immurement practices. Now, they have transformed through the ages, but anyone that has owned an old house, and it doesn't have to necessarily be really, really old. We're going to get into some of the things that if you own a very, very old home, pre 20th century, might just be in your walls. But for our, our supporters out there that have restored homes or done some sort of, work and stuff like that on older homes, you might find such things as newspapers, toys, different things outside of what you would think of as like a normal time capsule. These were also forms of immurement, and they were considered to be good luck for the home. So let's see what's going on in the comments real quick, and we're going to get into some of the things, like I said, that you might actually find in the older houses even today. So let's see what's going on in the comments. I'm going to try to keep my finger out of y'all's faces. Let's see. Hi, Susan. How are you? Hey, Tom. Hey, John. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Lacey. Hi, Raven. Hi, Patricia. Hi, Marianne. How are you? All right. Let's see. Thank you, Roots Bleed Red. Thank you. Hi, mods. How are you guys? All right. Hi, Sykes. Let's see. Yes, thank you for joining us, Susan. It's good having you here as well. And let's see. Lewis says, my dad was a building contractor, building over 110 houses in his life. Exon U images, if he, hold on, I've got my gimbal right here is propping this up. Let's see if I can see what this is. If he did this in his buildings, when he was building, he very well may have, but there are all kinds of stories, all kinds of groups, even here on Facebook that you can join that will show what people have found behind the walls of old homes and things like that. So really interesting stuff, some neat stuff, some spooky stuff too. Let's see. And then Maud says, in the days before alarms, they had screaming kids in the wall. Well, now some of the immurements and the foundation sacrifices were not always done to corpses. They were sometimes done to living human beings. They would be pretty much walled up within the foundation and left to starve. So yeah. Okay, so let's get into some of the things that people that own homes that haven't done a lot of work to them might be looking at your walls a little bit differently after this. All right, so in the medieval centuries, right up to the early 20th century, making their homes safe for their families meant not just keeping robbers and murderers out, but also the power of witches and supernatural forces. This was done by simple drawing protective symbols on rafters, beams, and window sills, or even placing objects within the walls of their homes, particularly cats. Although some accounts claim the cats were walled in alive, examination of recovered specimens indicate post-mortem concealment in most cases. When working on old buildings, it is not uncommon to come across a mummified cat in the wall, or over the door lintels, or under the roof rafters, between the chimney stack and the wall, and under the floorboards. These were the links people went to ward off evil spirits, witches, curses, and disease, or more positively, encourage fertility. Because cats were so readily associated with witches, it would be perfectly normal to take a cat, usually already dead, and place it in a location that was vulnerable to witches entering the home. It was widely considered that witches could fly, so a witch could get in not just through a door or a window, but down a chimney too. Cats were also known to sense ghosts and other supernatural beings more readily than humans, which is why it was believed their presence in the walls of the house helped to ward off such malevolent forces. In addition to protecting against witchcraft, it is possible they were also placed within the walls of the house to scare away vermin in those concealed areas, which does make sense. But all that aside, now and again, you will also come across accounts of an old house in Britain that is home to a skull. These macabre ornaments are not hidden, but displayed with great pride in the houses that they belong to. And these are some specimens of the emermed cats that have been found in walls. So, yeah. So, the writing down of these stories was done primarily during the 18th and 19th centuries when it came to the screaming skulls. Most of the skulls have not yet been dated and their origins are not known. Most seem to be a form of guardian for the house. Located by windows, stairs, chimney stacks, entry points where spirits are said to be able to get into the house, much like the emermed cats. They also kept bad luck out of the house and surrounding land. Not surprising, it was thought that bad luck rushes in when the skull is taken out of the house. Each skull has its own story of its origins and purpose. These stories generally fall under two themes. The first is that the skull is a protective charm for the dwelling and or family that resides there. The second is that the skull has a significant has a significance being where it is, and that dire things will happen should any attempt be made to remove it. These skulls have been of great interest to folklorists and those interested in the paranormal over the years, with all sorts of theories and ideas about the reasons and origins of this behavior being present. Are they really a relic from the days of ancestral worship, or even the supposed Celtic head-collecting cults? Whatever the origins may be, the screaming skulls make for fantastic folkloric ghost stories. Many old houses in England have in their possession a human skull, of which there are superstitions and they are fiercely protective of. Usually displayed prominently to guests, the first records of such skulls date from the 18th century when the field of antiquarianism, having a hard time saying that anyway, began to flourish. So in other words, again, they started to be notated around the 18th and 19th century when there were a lot of people going around and like studying antiques and things like that, um, and kind of keeping track of that. So the houses with these unusual heirlooms usually had a fascinating story of how the skulls came to be there. The date of origin always beyond living memory. The skulls acted as sort of a talisman, and their presence in the house was linked to the resident family, to their family's prosperity and health, and even protected from the supernatural. Were a skull to be removed from its rightful place, however, all hell would break loose. Family members and livestock would die, crops would fail, objects would be mysteriously broken, and ear-splitting shrieks would haunt the vicinity, and would only cease once they were put back safely into their niche or pedestal in the house. Across England, there are numerous tales of skulls being removed, the ensuing chaos, and finally resolution of the problems. The term screaming skull was coined during the 19th century. Now, Andy Robertson and David Clark give 27 cases of screaming skulls in their article published in the Florentine Studies, Volume 3, titled Heads and Tails, The Screaming Skull Legends of Britain. And it is actually one of the best written pieces about this, with only one of these skulls actually being located outside England. It's very much an English phenomenon, who strangely do not have a history of head hunting or head reverence that the Celts had up until the Iron Age. And what we're going to get into, these are some of the stories of the screaming skulls. But let's see what's going on in the comments real quick. And Lewis says, yes, they were. Okay. Hi, Genevieve. How are you? Let's see. And John says, sometimes it costs an arm and a leg to buy a home. Well, it could cost a cat or maybe even a head, depending on where you live. Hi, Richard. How are you? And then Lewis says, love your outfit, by the way. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It takes a lot to keep, this girlish glow, this corpseous glow. And let's see. Okay, so Richard says, I wonder who moved skulls in 2020 and this year. Oh my goodness, right? It must have been like some sort of collaborative effort, because the world just went batshit crazy. And let's see. Syke says, I love watching it. So interesting. Well, thank you. I do try to bring you guys some interesting content. It's a little out of mainstream, because some of the mainstream stories, don't get me wrong, are absolutely fabulous. But there's so much out there that is just as interesting, but for whatever reason, it's just not as well known. So, and that's the cool thing about history. You never run out of topics, large or small. All right, so these are the stories, like I said, some of the stories of the screaming skulls. So perhaps the most famous screaming skull of all was at Bedscombe Manor, Dorset, the ancestral home of the Penny family. Azalea Penny was said to have been sentenced to be hung, drawn, and quartered for participating in the 1685 Monmouth Rebellion. It was a plot to overthrow the Catholic King James II. But he escaped to the West Indies. Azalea became a rich plantation owner on Nevis, which is, I guess, like an island down in the West Indies. And many years later, a descendant returned to Bedscombe with a black slave. The climate did not suit the slave, alas, and he passed away with his dying wish that he be buried on Nevis. Now the slave gave the warning that if his request were defied, the house would have no peace. It was ignored anyway, and he was buried at the local churchyard. Bedscombe was instantly cursed with terrible luck and ghostly screams and nocturnal crashes. Fearing the dead man's curse, the Pennies removed the skull from the body to the manor, and peace was restored. They secreted the skull in a niche up the chimney breast, lest it be stolen by a burglar with an eye for a curio. It is also said that anyone who steals it will be dead within a year. One tenant is supposed to have thrown the skull into a pond to rid the home of the grisly item. Although the night, all through the night, the manor shook on its foundations, and screams and echoes down the corridors until the owner was compelled to return the skull to its place of pride and peace. The story of the screaming skull was first investigated by J.S. Udall, a Dorset antique collector. After examining the skull in the 1880s, he believed it had belonged to a female, a hypothesis corroborated by other local stories that it was the relic of an anonymous woman murdered in the mansion's attic. The true provenance of the skull may never be determined, but when actually dated, the skull was found to be over 2,000 years old. It is thought to have come from the Pinsden Pen, an Iron Age hill fort not far from Bettescombe Manor. The mysterious skull is still in residence at Bettescombe Manor, and hence has not been heard screaming for many, many years. Now, this one is my favorite, and I just get a kick out of the daggum picture that we've got for you. So this is called Dickie's Screaming Skull. Now, sitting along the road between Whaley Bridge and Chaplin Le Firth in Derbyshire is Tunstead Farm. In this ancient and grim-looking farm is a most curious artifact, a skull simply known as Dickie. Much feared by the owners of the farm and the local community. If treated with respect, it would open gates on the farm. Also said to be a supernatural guardian of the farmhouse, and forces knocking noises to herald the approach of strangers. Supposedly, Dickie's rappings have also heralded deaths in the family and further issues with livestock. However, if treated with disrespect, there would be no peace. Although there are a few stories that explain the origins of Dickie, the most accepted story is that it is the mortal remains of a soldier named Ned Dickerson, which makes sense. When Dickerson returned from war, he attempted to lay claim to Tunstead Farms, saying it was part of his inheritance. Dickerson's cousin, of course, didn't quite see it that way. They wanted the farm for themselves and would do anything to have it. One night, as Dickerson slept, his cousins fell upon him and beheaded him in his own bed. With the deed done, they buried him in a shallow grave and claimed the farm as their own. A few days followed the burial. The cousins experienced all manner of ghostly activity. Loud bangs and screaming kept them up at all hours of the night. They even claimed to be attacked by the ghost of the cousin they viciously murdered. When they couldn't take it anymore, they consulted a local witch to help them with the angry ghost. The witch explained to them that they needed to dig up Dickerson's head and keep the skull in the house. She believed this, and this alone, would put the ghost to rest and peace would fill the farm once again. They did as the witch told them and the haunting of Tunstead Farm stopped. Ned Dickerson finally appeared to be at rest. Over time, the skull known as Dickie became something of a guardian of the farm and surrounding land. Anyone who dared to trespass on the land claimed to feel the vengeance of Dickie. The screaming skull of Tunstead Farm is also believed to be responsible for the railroad failing. According to locals, when the railroad threatened the farm, accidents befell the construction crew, forcing them to walk off the job. Dickie has also been stolen a few times, only to be returned when the thieves experience bad luck. As long as Dickie stays safe and sound, he remains quiet and peaceful. Dickie remains at the homestead where he occupies his usual spot by the kitchen window. And there's little Dickie. But he does. They have to turn him to where he can look out over the farm. But yeah, I think that story is very, very cool. So the next one is called The Skull of Theophilus Brahm. There is a supernatural tale of skulls and other dismembered parts of the body haunting people with a view to being reunited with the remainder of the corpse. The skull of, I'm just going to call him Brahm, offers precisely the opposite scenario. Brahm was a royalist during the English Civil War, but he defected to the Roundheads in horror at the inhumane acts the royalist troops carried out in the name of the king. In particular, he despised the royalist habit of severing the heads of victims and spiking them on rails as trophies. On his deathbed, he made a plea to his sister that his head should be separated from his body so that even if his body were exhumed, no head could be discovered and be impaled as a trophy. His plea to his sister was that his skull should forever or should never leave the farmhouse. Brahm died at age 69 on the 18th of August, 1670. Over the years since that time, several tenants of the farmhouse at Clinton Canron near Yeovil, Somerset, have attempted to remove the skull, only to be plagued by horrid screaming noises until it was replaced. One tenant went as far as to try and have the skull reunited with the body in Brahm's grave, and even secure permission for this. During the attempt to exhume the body, the sexton's spade broke in half, convincing all concerned that this was not in accord with the wishing of the subject of the exercise. The skull was then returned to its home. His tomb can be found within St. James Church, but the skull itself can only be seen by written appointment. So let's see what's going on in the comments real quick, and then I think we're going to go to a real short break. All right, let's see. So John says, yes, the Celts had some kind of head fetish. They cut their enemies' heads off as trophies. Wonder if that's how this started. I don't know. You know, that's something a lot of the like folklorists and historians have contemplated. That it's very, very odd that this seems to be, you know, very particular to the British Isles when there wasn't an overabundance of what they consider the Celtic head cults. But it is fascinating. It really is. And then Damon says that I look awesome for my age. Thank you. Thank you. You know, it's not easy being, oh my goodness, I have completely lost track of my age. I believe that I'm going on 168 maybe. I'm not really sure. But thank you very much. Let's see. And then Richard says mainstream can be boring and overplayed. I like the other stuff. I really do too, Richard. I really do. And then Maud says, Dick Dickerson here. And these cars have got to go. Yeah, wow, they beheaded him. Yeah. Story time with Mother. Thank you, Nicole. And let's see. Richard says, moral of the story is don't take something that isn't yours. Exactly. And then Patricia says, great bedtime story. Hi, Dom's mom. All right. So the next story we're going to get to, well, I tell you what, let's take a short break real quick so that we can do our promo. And I'm going to Okay, so the next story we're going to get into is called the Wardley Skull. The Wardley Skull has two potential roots. One is fanciful and one is probable. The less likely legend surrounding the skull is that the cranium of Roger Downey's, a shamed member of the family owning Wardley Hall, who, after escaping a murder trial, drunkenly attacked a watchman who swiftly beheaded Downs with a swipe of his rapier. The skull at Wardley Hall, Lancaster, home of the Catholic Bishop of Stalford, is believed to be of a Catholic martyr, Father Ambrose Barlow, which is the more probable story. Beheaded in 1641 for holding a Catholic Mass, which makes it a sacred relic at this point, is still what all the powers of, it still holds all the powers of a, I guess you'd say, a normal screaming skull. His severed head was subsequently put on display at Lancaster Castle, later being stolen by a Catholic sympathizer and secreted within the walls of Wardley Hall. The skull lay undiscovered until the 18th century, where the legend surrounding its power began to take hold. It is said that, believing it to be an animal skull, a servant of Matthew Morton, the then owner of Wardley, hurled the skull into the hall's moat. That night, a particularly strong storm broke out. Both the skull and the hall's owner were very displeased with the turn of events, with the owner demanding the draining of the moat and the safe return of the skull. The skull was also said to be able to turn into a hare. Although not open to the public, the Wardley skull remains protected in a niche beside the main staircase, preserved behind glass. And there it is. All right, and the next one we're going to get to is Burton Agnes Hall. Now, this next story is attached to Burton Agnes Hall in East Yorkshire. It is a strong part of the local folklore, but there is no historic record to confirm it. It is set around three daughters of the house, Frances Margaret and Catherine, who was known by her baptismal name of Anne. Anne was passionately involved in the building of the house. Now, not long after the house was finished, Anne was attacked by beggars on the way to another village and left for dead. She lived on for another 3 days. During this time, she got her sisters to promise that after her death, that her head would be removed and kept in her beloved home. When she died, however, this promise was ignored, and she was buried complete in the churchyard. At the hall, night after night, everyone was kept awake by supernatural disturbances and screams and all sorts of shenanigans. The vicar asked the sisters to honor the broken promise, and her body was dug up. The body was totally intact except for the head, which was reduced to a clean skull. This was taken to the hall, where peace returned. Repeatedly, the skull has been removed from the hall, but then all hell would break loose and it would be returned. Two particular occasions were recorded on what happened when it was removed. The first occasion was when a new maidservant took a dislike to the skull and threw it out of the window into a cartload of manure. The horse pulling the cart froze and would not move, no matter how much they were whipped. It was soon found that the maidservant had done what she had done with the skull. The skull was retrieved from the manure, and the horses moved off at once. The second occasion was when one of the Brompton family buried it in the garden. It is quoted that the most dismal wailings and cries kept the house in a state of disquiet and alarm. It was then dug up and restored to the hall. Annie's ghost has also been seen from time to time in the hall. Sir Henry Boynton, at the end of the 19th century, It is said that the skull was bricked up somewhere within the hall itself. The hall is still owned by the Brompton family and now open to the public. And I think we do have a picture of Brompton Hall. Yeah, beautiful home. Beautiful home. But it's supposedly, the rumor is, it's bricked up somewhere within that home. I think we might finish a little early tonight. I'm not sure. Okay, so the next one is called Colgrith Hall. The last famous Screaming Skull story involves two skulls. It is at Colgrith Hall in Cumbria. The land where the present hall is sitting originally belonged to elderly farmers by the name of Castor and Dorothy Cook. Their land bordered on the land of a wealthy justice of the peace by the name of Miles Phillipson. Phillipson wanted their land to build his new home in Colgrith Hall. The cooks, however, stubbornly would not sell. Phillipson then invited them to feast at his home. On display was a valuable silver cup, and at the end of the evening the cup went missing. A search was made, and it was found to be in the clothing belonging to one of the cooks, where it had been planted by Phillipson. They were arrested and appeared before Phillipson because he was the local justice of the peace. And of course he found them guilty and sentenced them to death. Dorothy Cook laid several curses on the Phillipson family from the dock. In brief, they would haunt their family forever, and they would never be rid of them. Also, the Phillipsons would never prosper, nor would any future generations of the family until they would be forced to sell the hall. They were duly taken out and hung. Now, Colgrith Hall was then built on their land and was finished just before the next Christmas. On Christmas Day, they had a party to show off their new home. The wife went up to the bedroom during the party. Coming back, she found two human skulls leering at her from a niche at the top of the stairs. After this, the skulls were buried, burnt, and reduced to powder. But always they came back to scream in the night and laugh at the family's misfortunes. Bit by bit, the Phillipsons lost their fortune, and within a few generations it was all gone, and the hall was sold to strangers. It was said that one of the skulls was taken to London in the 18th century and never returned. The other skull mounted away at the hall. However, local people do swear that they still, from time to time, have seen the two skulls at the hall. Eventually, the hall was purchased by Bishop Landaff, and under local pressure, he did have the skulls exorcised, and then they were bricked into their niche. They have not been seen since that time. This case is by far the most published of all the Screaming Skull stories. And that is about all you can find on those two skulls. I have not been able to find any pictures of those two skulls. But fascinating just history with this kind of stuff. You know, from the immurement and some of the sacrificial things that they used to do, to just some of like the local folklore and practices that have come down through the ages. I just think it's so fascinating. So being that we finished up a little bit early, I guess we can have like a chit chat. So anybody want to talk about, questions, anything like that? We'll make a go of it for a little while. All right, let's see what's going on here in the comments. Let's see. So Sykes says the skull sounds a lot like Indiana Jones in the Temple of Doom. Yeah, with the crystal skull, yeah. It does have a lot of those feels. You wonder if, you know, present day Hollywood has taken some just like bits and pieces of a lot of old folklore to put together to make a storyline, but it does. Let's see. And then Nicole says, what kind of redhead, bratty child if I didn't acknowledge my mother? Let's see. And then Damon's getting ready for bed. Let's see. And he also says, hopefully I can get 2 more hours of sleep tonight. Well, hopefully the weather is not going to be bad. We had rain here today, but thankfully it seems to have blown over. Yes, yes, John. So this, let's see. Is there a backstory to Mother Delamort? Yo, say you're 168. Well, Mother Delamort, she loves to collect souls and put them in her little minions. And I've been doing that for some time. So that's where my art comes in. Let's see. And then Nicole says, yep, I'm definitely her child. I can't even say a whole sentence without tripping over my own tongue. Oh my goodness, I have the same problem. And then Mark says, it's generally accepted that it is the skull of Ambrose Barlow. Yeah, that's what it was saying too. That seems to be the main story. Let's see. And then Angie says, hello. Hi, Angie. It's good to see you. I haven't seen you in a while. And then John says, can't be legal today to bury a skull in the house. Well, in these cases, they're part of the folklore and part of the ownership, like their property, their belongings. So yeah, today, you can, depending on your state, you can still purchase human remains, and even have them shipped. In some states, you can't have them shipped to you. You have to actually go pick them up. And some, they can only be preserved certain ways, and then some, of course, you can't have them at all. But skulls have to have the cranial cut. You can get in trouble if they find you with a skull that doesn't have the cranial cut. And being an artist that does deal with bones, don't think that there aren't people out there that keep track of that kind of stuff. So be very careful when you talk online about things like that. Let's see. So Ruth Bleed Red said that they would like to hear more about Winnebagos. Maybe. Now, see, the last time we did a feed here that was specifically about Winnebagos, our cats went nuts. So we'll see. I'll consider it. Let's see. So the mod at Psychomantium 13 says, what do you got coming up? Like maybe a zodiac-y thing. Yes, we have a zodiac-y thing that will be coming up soon. Hi, Dizzy. How are you? Let's see. And then Damon says, we had sleet today. Yeah, you guys are getting a lot of nasty weather up there, Damon. And let's see. Dom's mom. Let's see. Talking about skulls gives me the creeps and makes me sad. A very good friend of mine was beheaded by her husband, and he stuffed her under the bed. Oh my goodness, that's horrible. That's absolutely horrible. Well, the sad thing about it is that humans, of course, this is my way of looking at it. Humans, we're the only animal species that does true evil to our own. And I'm really sad to hear that, that happened. Unfortunately, there's just some not good people out there. And then Mark says, I arrived late. Sounds like I missed out on some good spooky history. Well, you can always do the hashtag replay, Mark. It was actually, I had 10 pages. We went through 10 pages that quickly, which is, I guess I was just on a roll. I don't know. Let's see. And then Richard says, I really have no use for human remains. Well, some people do collect them. Some people do collect them. That and animal remains, wet specimens, things like that. So it's just, it's different, different strokes for different folks. So let's see. No, Nicole, we said Winnebagos on purpose. You're not supposed to talk about them. So we refer to them as Winnebagos. And Richard says, I'm not sure it's just humans. My cats are assholes. Yeah, but I don't think that cats reach the evil plateau and levels that the human mind can. Let's see. I still want it. And then Roots Blade Red says, I still want a tooth ring. I do too. I do too. Bone Lust makes some really fabulous bone jewelry for people that are into that. Let's see. And then Genevieve says, such fun tonight. Well, thank you. I had a blast too. I had a really, really good time, and it was a lot of fun researching that. But yes, we do have upcoming some zodiacal stuff. One of my, I think he's one of the most interesting stories when it comes to particular serial killers, and probably just because we really don't have an idea of who he actually is. So let's see. And then Angie says, can you see my comment, Odd Mother? Let me look. I saw where you said hello. Let's see. Yes, I saw it. I saw it, hon. And I said hello. So hello again. All right, let's see. The percentage of being murdered by a cat is low, but never zero. Now, this is true. This is true. And they will get you at the most unsuspecting times, most definitely. So yeah, guys, I guess we're going to wrap it up a little early tonight. Because that's what I had. So, but I had a great time tonight. I hope you guys did too. Stay tuned. We have some awesome content artists. We have some really, really exciting stuff coming in the month of April that I cannot talk about. And I am bursting at the seams to talk about. But you guys are going to be, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. We got some fun stuff coming in April. So, yes, Genevieve says the Zodiac is fascinating. It really, really is. And so many different thoughts on that and who that could have been. Let's see. Well, thank you, John. So John says, good night. Great stories. Always an enjoyable hour. Yes. But I hope you guys have a great rest of the week. Stay tuned. We have got content creators and shows, streaming shows, and all different kinds of things throughout the week. We will see you back here next Wednesday. And pleasant nightmares, everybody. Bye.
This is Mr. Applewhite speaking. There is nothing wrong with your device. Join me here on Psycho Bunny DC. A delightfully dreadful consternation of horror content. Your head